This is tape number 1 to the arbitration testimony of Steven Beattie in the matter of Grand Canyon Skywalk LLC versus Yahwah Incorporated, being heard before the American Arbitration Association, case number 76177001911S1M. This arbitration testimony is being held at 3773 Howard Hughes Parkway, Suite 400 North, Las Vegas, Nevada, on March 19th, 2012 at 10:35 a.m. My name is Brian Bywaters with Esquire Solutions, Las Vegas. The court reporter is Heidi Constant. Counsel, will you please introduce yourself, after which the witness will be sworn.
This is Mark Trados representing Grand Canyon Skywalk Development Corporation and Mr. David Jin, the plaintiff in the arbitration.
Sir, can I have you raise your hand, please, to be sworn? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Beattie, will you state your full name and spell your last name?
Steven Beattie. That's B-E-A-T-T-I-E.
Will you give us your date of birth, please, sir?
September 17th, 1971.
Will you provide us with contact numbers for you, telephone numbers particularly, if you would, both a work number and a cell number?
My cell number is 602-618-7790.
Work number?
432-818-0390.
Mr. Beattie, where do you live?
Well, my permanent residence currently is Truxton, Arizona, although I work in Midland, Texas, and so spend at least half my time there.
Can you tell the arbiter, for purposes of this recording, if we're recording your testimony in order to ensure that you have the opportunity to testify in this matter because you may have work conflicts that would prevent you to do so otherwise?
That's true, yes.
If we needed to take further testimony from you during the period of arbitration, which is now slated between April 2nd and April 16th, could you appear potentially telephonically?
Yeah, definitely telephonically.
Okay. For purposes of today's testimony, I'm going to ask you questions. Your answers are being recorded by the court reporter, and they're also being videotaped. We will present the videotape to the arbiter for purposes of our case in chief. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
Do you understand that you are obligated to tell the truth in accordance with the oath that you've just taken?
Yes, yes, I do.
All right. Will you tell the arbiter, please, how you were involved with the development of the Skywalk and what your particular role was with respect to the Wallapai Indian Nation?
I began working with the Wallapai Tribe, or Grand Canyon Resort Corporation, which was their business arm, on July 6, 1999. I took the position of Chief Financial Officer. That was my capacity there. And as it related to the Skywalk, which came years later, I was the primary negotiator putting together the deal along with David Jin to build the Skywalk at Grand Canyon West.
Will you tell the arbiter, please, a little bit about your educational background?
I went to college at the University of Montana and received my bachelor degree in business, accounting, and marketing in 1994. It was December 94, I think, is when I finished.
And did you have opportunities to work as a financial analyst or CFO for any companies prior to taking this job with Grand Canyon Resort Corporation?
Not as a CFO, no. I had my own business most recently prior to taking the job with the tribe that I'd built up from ground up to be a successful business. So, I mean, obviously I kind of played the CFO role for that tiny little startup company, but nothing to the scale of Grand Canyon West.
Could you tell the Arbiter, please, from the time that you assumed your responsibilities as the Chief Financial Officer for Grand Canyon Skywalk, for Grand Canyon Resort Corporation, were you working for a specific person or persons? Who did you report to?
With my job with the tribe?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had a couple of different CEOs during my tenure, but Cameron Danes was the CEO when I started, and I believe in 2002, Sherry Yellowhawk took over that position, and I directly reported to her from that time to the end of my term there.
When you first started in 1999, did Mr. David Jen, the principal of Grand Canyon Development, did he have a business relationship with the Wallapai tribe?
Yes, he did.
What was that?
He brought a substantial amount of people out to Grand Canyon West through his bus tours, Oriental Travel and Tours, and he had also partnered with Grand Canyon Resort Corporation in starting a helicopter boat tour at Grand Canyon West, so he stood as partner in that relationship.
Could you describe to the Arbiter what the helicopter and boat tour consisted of?
The helicopter boat tour was from the location of Grand Canyon West. Okay, so whether people came out by bus, by airline, by Jeep, or any form of ground transportation, they may have purchased a helicopter boat tour as well. So they got out to the airport terminal and they boarded a helicopter from that point. The helicopter flew down into the Grand Canyon, to the very bottom of the Grand Canyon, where David had boats, where they would hike down from the landing pad to the boats and then do about a 20-minute tour on the Colorado River.
So they'd actually get on a boat and go up and down the Colorado River?
Yes, they would, yeah. Yeah.
Those tours were essentially created and operated by Mr. Jen's company?
Yes, it was David's concept or idea to add that tour that he pitched to the tribe, actually prior to my time there, and continued during the entire term that I was the CFO. But yes, he brought it and managed it and really built the market. You know, a good percentage of the people who were taking the tour were right from his own travel company.
Can you tell the Arbiter about when you first began negotiating with Mr. Jen regarding the concept of building the Skywalk, which now exists at Eagle Point?
We first actually began to talk about this subject in 2000. In 2003, several years later, we had continued to talk about it and a little bit about terms, but in 2003, the board that was in place at the time, that being the Grand Canyon Resort Corporation board, supported my suggestion to go full-term negotiation with David as the investor in the concept of the Skywalk. And so it began at that time, and negotiation was pretty heavy, 6 to 9 months period of time in 2003, leading up to signing the contract on December 31st, 2003.
Can you recall, other than Sherry Yellowhawk, who I believe you indicated was at the time the CEO, can you recall who else might have been on the board of Grand Canyon Resort Corporation that might have been familiar with those negotiations?
Yes. I don't know if I can list them all off the top of my head. Ted Casula was the chairman of the board at the time. Walt Mills was the vice chairman. And the other members, Catherine Landreth, Ronald Susan Yotomy, Sandra Yellowhawk. I believe Derek Watanabe was on at that time, who's a tribal member. Probably forgetting somebody. There were 7 members altogether, but those were at the time of approving the December 31st, 2003 agreement. Those are the ones that I remember.
Do you recall if during the process of negotiation, you as the chief financial officer reported to this group or board the progress of the negotiations?
Absolutely. We had at least monthly meetings. Sometimes we'd have conference calls. But obviously I reported directly to Sherry as things progressed, and then also reported it to the board members every step of the way leading up to what they approved as the final document.
This board was the board that governed the tribally charted entity, Grand Canyon Resort Corporation. So they were the board members of that corporate entity, correct?
That's correct, and then became the board members of Nyu Wa Corporation, which was actually the entity that was written in as the partner to Grand Canyon Skywalk Development Company, Davis Company.
I'm sorry, can you explain to the arbiter how Nyu Wa came to be created?
We felt like with the conditions that we had in our bank agreement with Grand Canyon Resort Corporation, or what formerly was known as Bywaters Corporation, had some restrictions that we didn't want to subject the Skywalk to. So at that time, it was brainstormed, and a new tribally chartered company, Nyu Wa, was developed for the purpose of doing the Skywalk transaction.
Can you tell the arbiter, please, what specifically, how the Skywalk concept was first raised, and you've mentioned the period of time in negotiations, but why did it take from 2000, when the concept was first raised, to 2003 to get a completed agreement? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of processes to go through working with the tribe. So naturally, you know, for me, I'd start with my boss and get them in support of it, and then taking it from there. Now, the original, when the original concept or idea came to us, my thought was that maybe we could build it ourselves and did not need a partner. And so we originally brought it up to the board on that level. You know, some process was done. Of course, major changes happened with 911. We had a helicopter crash, took a lot of energy. Time just continued to pass. Continued to talk about with David. I think as it progressed into more like 2002 or so, the reality that this was, you know, at least a several $million project, of which we weren't in a position to afford, kind of then evolved into the fact that, hey, we need help from an investor standpoint to fund this. And then it progressed into, you know, that kind of discussion when it brought, you know, by the time 2003 came around, this was almost an entire new board that the idea was brought to at that time. Than the original one in 2001 or whatever when it first brought to them.
Specifically in 2001, was the idea of building a glass viewing platform an idea that David Jen brought to the tribe?
Yes, I came to understand later he had brought the idea to a gentleman named Lamar Whitmer. And so Lamar, who was a consultant at the tribe at the time for us, discussed the idea with us officers in the company, and hey, what do you think about this if I did this and built? So that's kind of where the original idea, but you know, David had discussed it with Lamar, and then I came to find that out later, and then more of the discussions were directly just David and I about it, and how we could go about, you know, getting a deal done to build it.
When the negotiations began for the actual contract in 2003 to build the Skywalk, who were the primary parties engaged in the negotiation?
David and myself. Almost 100% of the negotiation process was just me and him. There was occasion where other people would be present when we were discussing it, but by and large it was me and him negotiating out those terms.
Who else might have had some activity or been aware of the negotiation process other than the members of the board that we've previously identified to whom you reported monthly? Who else might have been aware of the negotiations?
You know, those discussions before the board generally included all of the management team. So myself, Sherry Yahwah, of course, who I said was my CEO, Waylon Honga, who was the Chief Operation Officer at the time, and Erlene Havitone ran our river running operation, and Robert Bravo, our Grand Canyon West operation. So generally at that period of time, you know, they would have been present.
Okay. I'm going to show you what we have marked as Exhibit 1 to this testimony and ask you if you can identify this document as actually being the agreement that you negotiated with Mr. Jin, which became the development and management agreement between Grand Canyon Skywalk Development LLC and Nyu Wa.
Yeah, this is the agreement that I brought to David here in Las Vegas on that day, December 31st, 2003.
Was that
That's
agreement?
his and I's initials.
Was that agreement
Stage.
negotiated here in Las Vegas? As you negotiated, were any of those conversations, those negotiations ever taking place in Las Vegas?
Yep. Several times we met, you know, his office or locations to negotiate that out. You know, some of it was over the phone.
Okay.
But yeah, quite a bit here too as well.
Was that contract actually executed in Las Vegas?
Yes, it was. Yep, I brought it to David to sign. I was so anxious and excited to get it done. Drove all the way over and had him sign it, and we initialed every page.
The negotiations of the term then was your responsibility. Who gave you the authority to do that, to negotiate on behalf of the Wallapai tribally chartered corporate entity?
That was the corporate board, the GCRC corporate board that we talked about earlier. They directly gave me the directive to begin to negotiate with David, see if we could iron out terms for this.
Okay. And that was the board that you indicated that Ted Kusula was the chairman of?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. You previously indicated that the negotiation period took between 6 and 9 months to complete. During that process, were you the only one negotiating the actual contract terminology or terms, excuse me, not terminology, terms, or was there anyone else on behalf of the tribe negotiating specific terms?
You know, as it related to the business terms, you know, I was negotiating all of that. Now, when it came time to draft the document, the attorney tried to kind of put some terminology that would be favorable to the tribe, you know, built into the document. And naturally, as I brought things to the board, they might have suggestions or concerns, well, that influenced some of those terms.
Can you share with the arbiter the name of the attorney who was primarily responsible from the tribe's perspective in drafting the document?
Yeah, that was Snell and Wilmer was the the law firm, and Mark Orr was the attorney that drafted the document.
Specifically, at the time that you had completed terms and the document was prepared to sign, you indicated you were so pleased that it was completed that you came to Las Vegas to have it executed. Do you recall who was physically present when the contract was executed?
Yeah.
Who was there?
That was me and David, and my wife and 2 children were with me.
Okay.
That was it.
When you had a completed agreement signed by Mr. Jen, did you return that completed agreement to the tribe, in particular to the board, and did the board approve the agreement?
Yeah, I mean, they'd approved the agreement prior to signing it, or I wouldn't have gone and had him sign, but yes, yeah.
Okay.
Brought it back for Sherry. Felt like her as CEO should sign, the document, so yes, brought it back for that.
Can you tell the arbiter, please, specifically what you understood Mr. Jen's obligations to be under the agreement? What was he going to do under this agreement?
Well, a couple of things. One, obviously, was to develop, build, and pay for the construction of this skywalk concept, along with the visitor center that was with it, as well as provide a higher quality shuttle service at Grand Canyon West, which was a very big part of this agreement, and separately a shuttle on Diamond Bar Road, which was a very rough road that a lot of companies did not want to drive on, and this was an opportunity to get some of that business that wouldn't come otherwise by providing them the shuttle service on the road itself. He was providing that as part of the agreement as well. And that he would also manage the skywalk when it got completed.
In addition to his obligations, did he have some benefit that he would receive in exchange for providing the services that you've outlined?
Absolutely. The benefit would come from profit generated by the skywalk, namely as it related to the skywalk operation. He would share in that for 25 years, starting at 50% of the net revenue. And then, for as far as the shuttle, he got the agreement to continue to have the shuttle once the Diamond Bar Road was paved for 10 years. So whereas maybe he wasn't in a position to make a lot of money early on, he could make some money on that operation down the road. I think that's kind of where he was going to benefit as it related to the shuttle.
In addition to the right to manage and receive, as you indicated, 50% initially of the net profits, did he also get a exclusive right to occupy up to 50% of the total potential visitor volume on the skywalk?
Yes, that's an excellent point, and should have made that point as well. Very valuable piece was the ability to provide 50%, not only during the contract term of 25 years, but for an additional 15 years beyond the original 25, to supply up to 50% of the people who walk on the skywalk at a 15% discount to the lowest rate that we were giving somebody else.
Would that allow him then the opportunity to essentially make profit for himself by having the lowest discounted ticket and selling up to 50% of the total volume of visitors on that particular facility?
Absolutely, and it was a big part of, he stood in a unique position as not only the investor and developer of the project, but also given the fact that he had a very successful tour company, from that side, from a different company, he could make some money through this agreement, from his tour company, OTI.
I'm going to call your attention to the Exhibit 1 in front of you and ask you if you can identify on page 3 if you had negotiated a percentage of the gross revenues, and if you will, tell us what he was entitled to consider as gross revenues from the operation of the skywalk.
Well, it's spelled out pretty well in here, but any revenues directly produced by the Skywalk itself, whether it be people walking on it, gift shop sales at the Skywalk, meal sales at the Skywalk, any other special tours that might come out of the Skywalk, special parties, groups, weddings, all those kind of things would be encapsulated into that gross revenue. The pictures obviously were a big revenue source as well.
And you pictures, by that you mean the photographs that were taken of people who are visiting the Skywalk, capturing their moments on the glass bridge.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Okay.
That's all part of this gross revenue to be shared between the two partners.
And in particular, was there a time that in the negotiation process, you and Mr. Jin talked about the overall benefit that he would receive versus that which the tribe itself was going to be receiving, so that you had a sense of how much the tribe would benefit from this investment and this activity?
Well, I would say that, yeah, obviously was the driving factor to do this was the benefit to the tribe. From my perspective, and the seat that I sat in was to bring this project, which I believe to be, and said this years before we were even breaking ground, or not years before breaking ground, but years before it opened up, that it would be the catalyst to spurring great growth at Grand Canyon West, and ultimately the revenue, the net revenue that would flow to the tribe to help fund its various functions. And you know, an issue, of course, when he was going to build it was we had this existing business of 160,000 people, and we had a entrance fee that was a part of people coming out to get to see the Grand Canyon and go on the bus tour and eat a meal at the canyon. And so naturally, a part of the negotiation included him wanting a piece of that entrance money. And that was something I was very dogmatic that we were not going to give any of that, that anything that he would gain from it would have to come from the Skywalk, independent of the entrance fee. You know, and given that you know, I think I won that victory for the tribe, I always felt like more net revenue or profit would be earned on the entrance to Grand Canyon West side than there would be over on the Skywalk side. So even though we were giving up, you know, that 50% up front, it was probably more like 60% of the money created by the people coming out to walk on the Skywalk that would be over on our side. So ultimately, when I say our, I mean the tribe, we would really retain 80%, would be probably more the number that we would retain of the profit created by the Skywalk.
And that was because every time someone came to see the Skywalk, they would have to pay an entrance fee to just get on the reservation, correct?
Yep. You know, at the time when we opened, the entrance fee was $50.
Okay.
And
is that $49.95?
$49.95. And the Skywalk was $25, or it might have been $24.95. So right there, you know, you have 2/3 of the actual gross revenue for somebody that's coming out to walk on the Skywalk that's first retained by the tribe before the 1/3 to walk on the Skywalk. So I felt very strongly that that I had negotiated a tremendous deal for the tribe to get somebody to fund 100% a project, but yet we retain 80% plus. And I say plus because on the back end of the contract, we actually got a higher percentage of the gross revenue created, the net revenue created by the Skywalk.
Is that because under the terms of Exhibit 1 that's in front of you, Mr. Jin's participation in the net proceeds was 50% for the first 5 years and then stepped down, so that the last 5 years of the 25-year term, he was only receiving 25% of the net profits afterwards. Is that
That's correct. Yeah, it was kind of a stare-down process where the first 5 years were 50% or 50-50, going to 40% for David in the second 5 years, years 6 to 10. Then down years 11 to 15, we're going down to 30%. Actually, the last 10 years, 16 to 25, were 25% to David or 75% to the tribe. Now that was, did have a catch to it in that David would have to recover the money of his investment prior to it departing from the 50%.
So he would maintain 50% until he had recouped his investment, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Under Exhibit 1, was the anticipated investment he was going to make something that you negotiated and discussed with him?
Yeah, I mean, we discussed that back to really 2000, 2001, when it's just a concept and we're throwing it around. And it just grew over time. I think even he thought maybe it was in a $3 million range as we were negotiating this out. By the time we were signing the agreement, I believe we felt there was going to be a $6 to $10 million project.
The $6 to $10 million number ever articulated in the Exhibit 1 agreement? Was it specifically laid out as being a $6 to $10 million range?
In this agreement?
Yes.
I can't remember if that, I'd have to look at it. I don't think it was specifically that number.
But do you recall clearly that that was a number that you understood and that the board of Grand Canyon Resort Corporation understood would be the investment?
Oh yeah, without question. It was something that was talked about with a GCRC board back to the original idea of us doing it, right, and the number that we'd possibly be looking at all the way up until the time that we were negotiating with him. And it was well understood what we were trying to build and that it was a $6 to $10 million range. The actual size, I remember the size for sure, is addressed in the contract.
Okay. Let's talk about that. Specifically, where in the agreement is the size of the project as it was anticipated when this agreement was signed in December of 2003? Where is that located in the agreement, the size?
Take maybe a little break.
Sure, we can take a break. Sure, we'll go off the record for a moment.
Off the record at 11:07 a.m. On the record at 11:08 a.m.
Mr. Beattie, have you had an opportunity to identify where in the contract of the December 2003 agreement, where the provision as to the size of the skywalk was?
Yeah, it's right here in Exhibit B,
And
which addresses a couple things.
what does Exhibit B address?
One was the size of the skywalk itself, which was to be 6 feet wide, protruding 30 feet out over the edge of the canyon, and 130 feet in total length within the horseshoe itself. And then the second thing it addressed, well, actually addressed several things, but the other big thing was the visitor center, the 5,500 original square foot size of the visitor center that we were anticipating building at that time.
After the Skywalk development and management agreement was executed in December of 2003, did you shortly thereafter begin talking with Mr. Jen about his company actually increasing the Skywalk size, the volume of visitors that could be accommodated?
Yeah, right after, of course, it was official, and he knew he was going full bore at that point in time and beginning to spend probably a ton of money towards the engineering standpoint. All these other questions started coming up as we began to identify how many people can we have on this 6 foot, 30 foot out. And it was looking like 500 to 600 people a day. That obviously was a big concern for me right away because we'd had over 500 to 600 people out to Grand Canyon West already. And obviously we anticipated a dramatic growth eventually related to the Skywalk. And my concern was that the very first day, somebody that came all the way from Germany to the U.S. because he wanted to walk on the Skywalk shows up and he can't walk because it's not, you know, we're at capacity and we can't fit him on. So at that time I just really started pushing hard that we needed to go bigger, and but obviously he then came back and said, well, if we do go bigger, we were talking about, you know, up to 60 feet and then ultimately 70 feet, which I think is the final length that it ended up being, that it would mean dramatically more cost based on his feedback from engineers and architects and in that process. And then, of course, expanding the building, because we're going to have that kind of traffic going from this 6-foot wide, 30-foot skywalk that can handle 500 to 600 people to a 70-foot out, 10-foot wide that can handle 5,000 to 6,000 people, or 10 times growth. Obviously, we needed a bigger building to house the amount of people that would be walking on the skywalk, and so that drove, you know, a bigger building as well.
When did you first raise this issue of, okay, we've signed an agreement for a smaller skywalk and smaller visitor center? When did you first raise the issue of expansion with Mr. Jen?
It would have been in January. You know, we're talking about it, and back and forth. He's hearing new stuff. They say they can't do this, or they say they can do this, and he's, you know, continually giving feedback related to his conversations with the engineers, and so it would have been during that time that we're talking about size and you know, how far are we going to go with this thing? Are we going to do it right the first time and build it bigger to where it can sustain the growth long term, or not? And then so this discussions back and forth during that time frame.
As a result of the discussion, was there an understanding to amend the terms of the 2003 agreement in some written form by letter exchange between you and Mr. Jen's company?
Yeah, there was a letter, and you know, that letter was, as much as anything, was clarification of terms that were, you know, a true reflection of what was agreed upon and understood between the parties, as well as addressing, hey, a bigger skywalk, bigger, more capacity, and starting the shuttle service earlier, I believe, was in that letter as well. So there was a couple of things addressed there.
Let's talk about the shuttle service very briefly. Specifically, can you tell the Arbiter, at the point that you were asking Mr. Jen to provide shuttle services, what kind of vehicles was Mr. Jen operating that he would provide the shuttle service with?
He was operating these higher-end type coach buses, you know, something that cost in the range of $500,000 new. That was, you know, more of a luxury type experience comparative to what we were operating at the time.
What was the tribe operating at the time before Mr. Jen was contracted under the 2003 agreement to, in addition to building a skywalk, start providing shuttle service? What was the tribe using at that moment?
The shuttle service that the tribe, that we, as a business, were operating at the time were yellow school buses, used school buses.
So they were previously operated school buses?
Yes, yeah, I mean, towards the end of their life, like needing a maintenance staff to keep them running.
Were they air conditioned?
No, they were not.
Were they nice seats, or were they the hard school bus seat?
Just the school buses I grew up in, driving back and forth to games. Yeah.
Okay. So specifically, one of the advantages that the tribe was getting with the contract with Mr. Jen's company was they were going to get a much nicer bus. Why was that important to the tribe?
Well, I can tell you why it was important to me.
Okay.
As a negotiator, I thought it was a very, very big piece of this deal was getting that. Was one, here we're trying to come up with this high-end skywalk experience, once in a lifetime type experience, and we got yellow school buses transporting them out to it. It doesn't fit. So obviously we needed a major upgrade in the image. And secondly, when I did the study to say, okay, we're transporting about this many people on our bus, this is what our costs are by the time we pay them and maintain the buses and all this stuff. And the rate that I was able to negotiate was pretty comparable to what we'd then be paying to have a higher end experience. Now, we didn't transport everybody prior to this on the school bus because we let bus companies use their bus when they came out. But the tremendous value, of course, was image and experience for the customer. And then secondly was the Diamond Bar shuttle, which, I think even if you went to bid today, you would have a very difficult time finding a bus company willing to do it, let alone for essentially almost for free based on the terms of the agreement. So there was tremendous value to us to get that piece of it, and it's part of what I push for very hard. And also, just to go back to the understanding the concept that we were shooting for Grand Canyon West is we didn't want the experience at the South Rim. And one of the main problems that we saw there was a lack of a shuttle system, was this big convergence of all these vehicles and waiting lines getting into the gate and stuff. And we felt that we could control the experience much better by having everybody stop at a certain point and then provide a shuttle. And I'm under the understanding that I think that South Rim has considered that as well after we did it. We were kind of groundbreaking as far as that approach. So that was some of the thinking that went into that. So it was very, very big value add to have that.
After you began negotiating with Mr. Jin to modify the size of the skywalk, and you decided to clarify certain of the terms of the 2003 agreement, did Mr. Jin send you a letter outlining what he thought your understanding was and the modified terms?
Yep, there was a return letter. Yeah.
Can I show you here what we have marked as Exhibit 2 and ask you if Exhibit 2 is the letter that you received from Mr. Jin on exactly the point of a change that related to the agreement. Actually, I'm going to show. I've shown you what I thought was going to be Exhibit 3. I'm going to show you what I think is Exhibit 2. Is that the letter that you received from Mr. Jin?
Yep, I recognize this letter. Yeah,
okay,
that's true.
And did you respond to that letter in some fashion?
I wrote comments on here, if that's what. Yeah, yeah.
Is that your handwriting on there?
Yes, it is. That's my handwriting in my comments.
What was the reason for your handwriting there?
I really wanted him to start the shuttle right away, so that's this one right here. Once again, I wanted to get away from that yellow school bus image to the nicer school buses and to capture the additional visitation through the Diamond Bar shuttle. So that's that there. The second one is, okay, yeah, you've told me that it's going to cost much more than 6 to 10, but we're so early in the process. Let's wait till you have some construction receipts to confirm that it's over 10 million, and that we can talk at that time. Yeah.
Was the document I've shown you, Exhibit 2, Mr. Jin's response to your solicitation of the increased size of the skywalk?
Yeah, that's true.
Was your solicitation letter something that you sent to him? And I'm going to show you what is Exhibit 3 and ask you if that's the solicitation letter you sent to Mr. Jin asking to increase the size of the skywalk.
Yep, this is that letter.
Did you write this
You
letter?
can hardly see this copy. Yeah, I did, yeah. Yes, I wrote this letter.
And was this letter specifically your solicitation to Mr. Jin to have his company increase the size of the skywalk and increase the amount of the building cost?
Yes.
Okay. And did Exhibit 2 then respond to that letter?
Yes, it did. That's correct.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that you thought that these two letters help clarify the terms of the agreement, which is Exhibit 1.
Yeah.
Can you explain to the arbiter what you thought they did to clarify the terms?
There was, I think, just some misunderstanding related to the shuttle as to the delineation of payments both on Diamond Bar and for the actual shuttle. I think it said something of how if you're compensated on one, you can't be on the other. I think it says something like that, which wasn't really true to what was agreed upon. Meaning, you know, somebody came up, the Diamond Bar shuttle, that was their means of transportation to Grand Canyon West. There was a fee associated with that. And then now they got off, they paid for their tour, and now they're getting on the Grand Canyon West shuttle to the different points. You know, the original intent was to compensate for that as well, not to say, oh, it's one or the other.
Compensate Mr. Jin's company for
Yes,
that?
yes, yeah.
Okay.
The shuttle company.
He was providing the transportation from various points, and so each of the places that he transported, he was entitled to compensation for.
Yes, Diamond Bar shuttle, the Grand Canyon West shuttle, yeah.
There is also in the exhibit number 2 a reference to various utilities, and in particular utilities that were going to be essential for the completion of the buildings out at Eagle Point, and specifically the Skywalk building.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell the arbiter, please, if at any time during your negotiations with Mr. Jin and his company, if it was ever the responsibility of GCSDs to bring all of the utilities to Eagle Point, including water, power, sewage?
Never, at any time, was there any understanding by anyone that was involved in this process thinking that he was going to bring all of the power for Grand Canyon West, water, power, sewer, all the utilities, and then ultimately to Eagle Point. That was never a part of the deal, and it was a very well understood thing that the tribe, in conjunction with GCRC, the business, was going to provide the resources to build the infrastructure for Grand Canyon West. Now, he would have some infrastructure costs related to just, now that it's out at Eagle Point, there's some cost into hooking up into his building, that kind of thing. That was an understood cost component. But getting it to Eagle Point, you know, hardline power, water, a massive sewage system piping into there, that was understood to be the tribes or the Grand Canyon Resort Corporation, the businesses, the Wallapai Tribe's businesses' responsibility, definitely.
As the Chief Financial Officer for Grand Canyon Resort Corporation, was part of your annual budgets from 1999 through the time you negotiated this contract something that addressed infrastructure costs?
Absolutely. I think you could, you call those up dating back to even 04, 05, 06, even pre-Skywalk being built, up until the last budget that I did, which was 2008. And a substantial amount of resources created from the business, the cash flow from the business was intended to pour back into it, and particularly related to the infrastructure at Grand Canyon West. But yeah, I mean, why would we have been budgeting that if it was known that he was going to fund that? And so, a substantial amount of our discussions, because our vision for Grand Canyon West, we had a full land use plan, that was very detailed and involved a full build-out of Grand Canyon West, Skywalk being just one piece, the terminal just being one piece. And littered throughout that, and in our planning and thinking throughout that, was infrastructure. How are we going to get infrastructure out there? Obviously, our worries and concerns of that would have been completely alleviated if that would have been the case that he was going to provide it. But I think you'd be hard-pressed to find an investor willing to spend $100 million on infrastructure on an intended $6 to $10 million investment.
Well, and that's the point that I wanted to make. The scope of the original investment of the 2003 agreement was $6 to $10 million, correct?
Yes, it was.
And in order to be building a $6 to $10 million investment, you wouldn't expect that investor to invest another $100 million in a utility infrastructure, correct?
If there's one out there, you'll have to show me him, because I've never heard of such a thing. But yeah, that would be pretty amazing.
In your negotiations with Mr. Jin and Grand Canyon Development Corporation, Skywalk Development Corporation, did you, in fact, encourage Mr. Jin that the tribe would take its portion of the profits from the operation of the Skywalk and, in fact, invest in infrastructure?
Yeah, and that was full intent. You know, while I was there, my focus in my communication as it related to building a budget was the intent of taking what we were producing at Grand Canyon West and ultimately through the Skywalk back into really the infrastructure that would allow us to sustain the growth that we anticipated and we're pushing for. So yeah, that was our intention, at least during the time that I was there. And
was that conveyed to Mr. Jin? You tell him that?
Oh yes, yeah. We discussed it in great detail, and in truth, I think there was a breaking point where I could tell, wasn't sure if David was willing to step out and do this, because there was a level of risk for him in signing this agreement, and he was wavering on it. And I think stating that case, that hey, we're going to take whatever is created from this thing, we're going to pour back into Grand Canyon West and make it that much better for you, not only for your piece in the Skywalk, but also for your tour company, and more means of making money and making it that much better of an experience. So I think that was a part of what really sold him. And hey, they're committed to making this great too.
Did part of that improvement of the infrastructure include paving a portion of the road that was unpaved that led to the Skywalk? Yes.
Diamond Bar Road, is anybody who's been involved with Grand Canyon West, is an absolutely integral, central piece in the future and growth at Grand Canyon West. And the fact that it's unpaved, it's that 14-mile stretch that separates, paved access directly from Las Vegas to Grand Canyon West. So yeah, part of that would be, we discussed water, power, sewer, but obviously just as important, paving of Diamond Bar Road.
So until you left in April of 2008, it was always your understanding that the profits that the tribe was going to be making from their participation with Mr. Jin in this project was going to be reinvested in infrastructure and improvement to benefit everyone, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say exclusively, but yeah, a big percentage of that.
Are you aware whether any of those infrastructure improvements have ever been undertaken and completed by the tribe? For example, has there been a water line taken out to Eagle Point yet?
I'm not obviously there anymore, so I'm not right in the midst of everything that's going on as I was when I was there. But I've certainly heard a great deal as to what's going on, and without question, they put money towards a water line project that was in play when I was there and has continued to spend money. It's a water line that runs up Buck and Doe out to Grand Canyon West. I believe they spent money to get some telecommunications, like a cell tower of some sort. Obviously, that's an infrastructure as well. They've worked very hard in obtaining the funding for the Dam Bar Road, and I believe they've obtained a substantial amount of that funding. And to my knowledge, did some civil engineering type work, more planning type stuff related to infrastructure, how's it going to get laid out, that kind of stuff. So there's substantial money spent on infrastructure. Yeah.
My question was more specifically, have they run power to Eagle Point yet?
No.
Have they run water to Eagle Point yet?
No.
Have they run a sewer line to Eagle Point yet?
No.
Is there anything for David Ginn to tie into at present?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And since we sit here today in 2012, and he began his construction of the Skywalk beginning in 2004 after we signed these agreements, in that period of time, from 2004 into 2012, none of those infrastructure improvements have been accomplished by the tribe, correct?
Nope, not in that 8-year period of time, no.
Okay. Calling your attention to the specific point at which you were involved with Mr. Ginn on the engineering. Did you understand that as a result of the requested expansion of the Skywalk and the expansion of the visitor center that there were going to be accompanying delays in the projected time frame in which the Skywalk would be built?
He communicated that without question on the phone. Not only would there be substantial cost increases, which would make sense, but yes, that it would be something that would take longer time to build.
Was the tribal council, well, not tribal council, let me direct it more directly. Was the board of directors of Grand Canyon Resort Corporation aware that there was going to be a delay as a result of the expansion of the size and scope of the project?
Yeah, they were fully aware.
Okay. And so the fact that it took longer to complete the project than was originally anticipated was something that the board understood as the project was being developed.
Yep.
Okay. Was there any discussion while you were still the chief financial officer amongst any of the board of directors that Mr. Ginn wasn't completed or hadn't completed his obligations under the agreement to build in a timely fashion? Was anybody raising that issue while you were there as chief financial officer?
You know, naturally, it was a discussion. Once we signed the agreement, we wanted the Skywalk out there tomorrow, right? I mean, we knew the impact it would have, so without question, we pushed to get it done, and we were, I was constantly on the phone. Come on, David, pushing him, and of course, he was very motivated to get it done on a timely basis as well, right? The sooner he gets it out there, the sooner he can start recovering his cost as well. So he was motivated there. So it was definitely a discussion, and we were pushing hard to get it built. And then, there were some things that caused delay, that really the tribe contributed to causing delay as well in the process. So yes, it was a discussion. Yes, we were trying to push as hard as we could, and we wanted it done yesterday.
Okay. But did you believe he, Mr. Ginn, or his company was in breach of the 2003 agreement because of the amount of time it took to build the expanded project?
No. It was because it was communicated and we had a full understanding it was getting stretched out and why. And it got done, really, what got done in 2007 when we opened up, I think the temporary building, which that's all it was, going to be a temporary building, probably satisfies that 5,500 square foot requirement in there. So, we didn't feel like he's in breach of the agreement at that point in time. Although we were frustrated that it didn't get done earlier, I think we were informed enough to understand why, what construction components caused the delay, and that hey, he's as motivated as we are to get it done, right?
Specifically calling your attention to the opening. When did the Skywalk visitor attraction open?
March 28, 2007.
Can you describe for the Arbiter, please, whether the opening was as anticipated or whether it was unexpected in a sense that the tribe was not prepared for what transpired?
It was very unexpected into the sudden burst that occurred. You know, the only really, I know that I believed that long term we were going to have a lot of people. None of us believed it was going to be first day we're going to have 3,000 people. And really all we had to go off of to measure what are we going to have was how many people were pre-booking. And so we had this pre-booking of a couple hundred people. Unfortunately, they only reflected 10% of those people that actually came out, and we didn't expect that. We thought, well, maybe is this half the people are pre-booking, or we didn't really know because it's first time, and so we were completely caught off guard by the 2,500 people that came out right away the first day, and then it just kept going up. I think it was up to 3,200 within the first couple weeks in one day, and you know our system that we had in place, whether it be ticketing, the bus shuttle, or any of the processes were built for 4 to 1,000 people a day. And to suddenly get 2,500, bam, bam, every day overnight, mixed with some of the some problems we had just with our systems right before, it was chaos.
And when you say it was that chaos at the Skywalk, or was that chaos at the tribe's terminal where people had to check in?
Chaos at the terminal, chaos waiting to get on the bus shuttle, chaos waiting in line to eat out at Guano Point. But I would say if anything flowed amidst that chaos, the probably best was probably the actual flow of people through the Skywalk, building onto the walk and out.
That was the
it still needed improvement because it was brand new, and but it ran the best of the points of people movement.
And that was the component that Mr. Jen's company was responsible for.
That's what he was managing. Of course, he was also managing the shuttle, which the issue with the shuttle, just like the issue at the terminal, was not enough buses. You know, at the terminal we didn't have enough cashiers. There was only 4 buses and maybe needed 8 or 9.
Is there something that occurred that caused you to not use credit cards and therefore to have lots and lots of cash from the very first day continuing after the Skywalk opened? Yeah,
the managers failed to inform me that a few days beforehand our credit card machine had completely went down. So day one, we can't take credit cards, or we're actually having to take down credit cards when people didn't have cash, but the majority of people paid in cash. So you're running at that time in March, 400 or 500 people a day. You're having a decent day, and still majority of them are paying by credit card probably. To all of a sudden you got 2,500 people and a majority are paying cash. So cash went up 10 times. So all of a sudden there's just this crazy amount of cash to deal with, and I'm on the phone right away just fighting with Brinks to come out and do it. They didn't bring, before companies wouldn't want to come out because they don't want to drive on that road either. You got to drive on that road to get out there. So I felt like it was one of my better accomplishments actually. I got them out, I think it was in 22 days, to actually come out, install everything, turnkey, ready to go, and get away from actually having to have a courier transport $100,000 of cash, on a remote road. did not feel good about that. So yeah, we had a tremendous amount of cash early on until we got the credit card issue fixed.
So the Skywalk, it generates a much higher volume of visitors than was anticipated. Of the total tickets that were being sold for people to come onto the reservation and then eventually find their way onto the Skywalk, what percentage of those tickets were being sold by Mr. Jen's company? What percentage of those tickets were being sold by the tribe's entities?
I probably couldn't give a specific percentage, but I could say this, that definitely a majority of the money was collected by us. I mean, us being the tribe. There were several points of sale for the Skywalk. There was pre-sold tickets through the Cygnus system that we had. That all went to our bank account. There was Skywalk tickets sold at the terminal. That was all flown through our system, whether it be a credit card or cash into our Brinks, which made it to our bank account. And then we installed Brinks cash collection at the Skywalk as well, and that went to our bank account as well. So really, primarily David's company at the time was collecting. There was these pre-sold tickets to tour companies where they would buy like a group of 100 tickets at a time. And then there was credit card sales at the Skywalk that went into his account. So it was definitely a majority of the money collected went into SNW or GCRC bank accounts, because there was packages sold that included the entrance with the Skywalk, and so money all flowed together.
Did there come a time in 2007 after the Skywalk was open that there was a further amendment to the agreement, the 2003 agreement, that was essentially prepared between Nyu Wa and Grand Canyon Skywalk?
That's correct, yeah.
I'm going to show you what we've marked as Exhibit 4 and ask you if you can identify that document as the agreement we were just describing as the first amendment to the development agreement.
This one's dated September 10th. It seemed like there was a July, something like that, one first, and then this was kind of the final, cleaning up any kind of issues that there was in that one. But yeah, I recognize this as being the amendment.
Do you recall at the time if there was some specific changes that Mr. Jen had requested to be made relative to the agreement, and in particular, as it related to the tribe's right to buy Mr. Jen out of the contract, the 2003 agreement?
Yeah, I remember at that time, one of David's main points was that, hey, when we did this agreement and we built in this $50 million buyout, or the tribe's ability to buy out at $50 million, it was a $6 to $10 million investment. Now at the time, he's telling me and thinking this could be a $50 million investment. It could be 30, 40, $50 million investment. So obviously he didn't want to have the tribe be able to just step in and just take it for the $50 million. So he asked that to be removed as a part of this amendment.
And do you recall whether that was removed as a part of this amendment?
Yeah, I believe it was. That's my recollection.
Okay.
I'm not reading it specifically.
Well, I'm going to call your attention to the agreement and ask you if you will identify in section 2.8 of this agreement. 2.8 says sections 10(1)(c), D, and E of the agreement are hereby deleted. If you'll go back to Exhibit 1 and determine if that's the $50 million figure. Copies of this. Do you have copies of this?
Yep, that is. I'm conferring with the original agreement, and that's those points that we talked about. The ability to buy him out at certain points during construction and after construction.
And in
And that
particular,
was removed.
okay, and that was simply so that he would not be put into a position where, having invested a lot more money than was originally anticipated, he could still have all of his interest terminated for a $50 million price, right?
Yep, that was the motivation.
What was your understanding of what would have to happen if the tribe wanted to remove him based upon the amendment in 2007? What would they have to do if they wanted to remove him then from that point on? Could they just pay him
I guess
$50
the way
million?
I would have looked at it, we would have had to say, David, we'd like to remove you, and we would begin negotiating what that price might be.
Okay. And so that would be a negotiated price.
That would have been definitely my perception of what would happen. Yeah.
Okay. Let's take a break, and I'm going to grab another document for you. Thank you.
This is tape number 2 to the videotaped arbitration testimony of Steven Beattie. The time is 11:52 a.m. We're on the record.
Mr. Beattie, we've taken a break so we could get some additional documents for you to identify and authenticate. I'm going to show you what is Exhibit 5, and we're going to ask you if you can look at the last page of this, which purports to be materials from the Wallapai Council meeting, and ask you if on the last page of Exhibit 5 you can identify anything that it further supports the contention that Mr. Jen asked to have the $50 million termination provision removed because of the increased amount of his investment. Is there something in that document that shows that?
Yes, marked number 8, deletion of buyout provisions.
Would you read that, please?
SNW and manager have agreed to delete SNW's buyout provisions in sections 10.1 D, and E of the agreement, since these numbers were based on a smaller glass skywalk, which was originally estimated to cost $5 million.
So
Section 2.11 is referred to.
yeah, all right. And that's section 2.11 of the original agreement, which is exhibit number 1, correct?
Or is it is there an actual section 211
Yeah,
in
I
here?
believe there is.
Yeah, that's related to something else, though. I think this is referring to 211 of this amendment, actually.
All right. And in particular, was it your understanding at the time that that was entered that Mr. Jen had specifically asked for the $50 million to be removed so that he would not be diminished in the amount that he could recoup from this investment?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much summarized here. That was my understanding, as I talked about earlier. The investment grew so dramatically that the $50 million didn't make as much sense as it did to him when we were talking a $6 to $10 million investment, or as Mark put it in this little memo, $5 million.
All right. Specifically, during the process of negotiating the various terms with Mr. Jen, and then finally having the skywalk constructed, built, and opened, did you regularly, as the Chief Financial Officer for Grand Canyon Resort Corporation, report to the Board of Directors the various progress and expenditures that were being made in association with the development of the skywalk?
Yep, yes, I was. I was the kind of the primary person, I think, that did that throughout the construction of the skywalk, because I was kept so closely abreast of it through David and attending some of the meetings related to the engineering and that sort of thing.
I'm going to show you a series of minutes which we have that have been produced from the Grand Canyon Resort Corporation. Ask you if you can identify each of these, and I'm going to do this in fairly quick order for you. I'm going to show you what is marked as Exhibit 6 and ask you if you can identify these as, in fact, the minutes for the board for September 22nd, 2006, and specifically calling your attention to page 3 of Exhibit 6 to determine if that was that portion which was your Chief Financial Officer's report to the board.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. I'm going to show you what we have marked now as Exhibit
3 and 4. Yeah,
Three-
pages 3 and 4 are mine. Yeah.
All right. And does that accurately reflect what you were reporting to the board, to the best of your knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, the normal process for minutes were for them to pass through everybody, including myself, to make any edits or amendments before they were officially approved by the board. So I would have read this and had some input into the final document you're looking at there.
So it would have been accurate.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to show you what has been marked as Exhibit 7 and ask you if Exhibit 7 reflects the minutes for the December 8, 2006 meeting of the Board of Directors for Grand Canyon Resort Corporation. And is your report as the Chief Financial Officer contained on page 1 through 2?
Yep. Yeah, this would be accurate minutes.
All right. I'm going to show you what is Exhibit 8 and ask you if you can identify on Exhibit 8 as the minutes from the April 6, 2007 minutes for the Board of Grand Canyon Resort Corporation.
Which page were you?
In particular, I'm calling your attention to the first page where we're describing the difficulties that were encountered right after the opening of the Skywalk.
Mm-hmm.
This is the April 6th meeting, and the Skywalk had been opened, correct?
Yep, it had been open for just over a week, so we were fresh in the chaos of it right at this point when we had this meeting.
Does this board set of minutes reflect exactly the problem that was being encountered by the unexpected volume of visitors?
Yeah, probably, if anything, understates it.
Okay.
Oh.
All right. And in particular, when it's described there's a mob in the terminal, you couldn't walk through the terminal. People want to go to the gift shop, but it's clogged up. The line is long. People need to buy their tickets quick.
People need to use the bathroom and can't get there. Yeah, it was pretty
So
chaotic.
The Skywalk proved to be a significant draw then.
Without question. You know, I think just on a side note, if you really go back and you look at the numbers, if you look at the amount of people that were coming out prior to the Skywalk being done to when it was implemented in 2007, and the dramatic growth that took place at Grand Canyon West, you can tie pretty much every individual of growth to the people walking on the Skywalk. You know, I think it's very safe to make the case that all the new revenue created at Grand Canyon West can be attributed, or at least 80–90%, to the Skywalk. So all the success, not just from the Skywalk itself as a standalone operation, but the success from the entrance side can be brought right back to the Skywalk.
And you would think that attribution of success is all the Skywalk because there was no other development that was taking place at the reservation other than the Skywalk?
Well, I think it's based on the reality of the numbers. You go back to 1998 to 2005, before really the Skywalk started having an impact, and you're looking at 125,000 type people in 1998, growing to 140, or in other words, not really going not growing much in that period of time. Now you introduce the Skywalk. The concept of the Skywalk is out there in 2006. You begin to get growth. up until current, you're looking at almost the same stretch of time again, and he went from 140, 145 to, I hear there's something like 750 now out there. So it's clearly directly related to the introduction of the Skywalk. The buzz that Grand Canyon West got as a destination as a result of introducing the Skywalk that brought all these people. I think that's quite clear in the dramatic and sudden growth that occurred and has continued to occur. Because what about the people that are coming out with individuals walking on the Skywalk who aren't walking themselves? That's another component. So, you know, I mean, it's an analysis you could do, but most of the new net revenue out at Grand Canyon West, not just to the Skywalk, but through the entrance, is a result of the Skywalk.
Okay. I'm going to show you what we've marked as Exhibit 9 and ask you if you can identify that as also a set of board minutes from the October 5th, 2007 board meeting that, in fact, is also an accurate reflection. I think your report begins on page 2.
Mm-hmm.
Does this set of minutes accurately reflect what was transpiring there at the time?
Yep. Yeah, mine's short there, but yep, that's accurate.
Okay. And because you were the chief financial officer during these periods of time, you would have had an opportunity to review, see, approve each of these sets of minutes.
Yeah, it was something that was sent to me every time before that was approved and saying, hey, if there's something that needs to be edited here, particularly related to your section, you know, do so. And I did on several occasions.
Okay. I want to return very briefly to this issue of the Skywalk and the building. You previously testified it was never part of Mr. Jen's responsibility to put in the utilities, but it was a responsibility to hook up to the utilities once they were brought there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know of your own personal knowledge whether the building that was built by Mr. Jen at the facility was in fact something that Mr. Jen wanted to complete but was prevented from completing by tribal action?
You know, I can't say that I directly was in a meeting and heard that, or, but definitely was told that at some point in time, this fight began. I think that led us to here, disagreeing on things, and there was a stop work order sort of thing by the tribe. So I haven't seen the document, but I've heard that.
Okay. Do you have today, as we are taking your testimony, a sense as to whether or not the tribe has significantly received the benefit that they were anticipating to receive by Mr. Jen's operation of the Skywalk? Did they get what you expected to deliver under the terms
Before
of
it was
the
ever
agreement?
even built?
Yes.
Is what you're asking?
Yeah.
I would like to think that it's superseded most people's expectations as to, the level of business and ultimately revenue that it created. I would say has exceeded most people's expectations. Now, I think that David and I, in our expectations and the way we talked, we expected to be at this place that it's at now and beyond, really. I don't know that, once again, that anybody expected that immediately day one, but 5 years later. But in general, I think for the people, the members of the tribe, I think it caught them by surprise, the level of exposure that they got for their destination and for their tribe because of this Skywalk.
Do you believe the Skywalk will be more profitable once the infrastructure is in place?
Yes, and particularly directly related to Diamond Bar Road. You have 1.5, 2 million people bypassing Grand Canyon West going to the South Rim. How much of that do you capture once Diamond Bar Road's paved and it's no longer a deterrent? because you start getting a lot closer on the actual cost to a bus company, even though they pay an entrance fee, whereas they don't pay near the entrance fee at the South Rim. But the distance and the cost per mile suddenly becomes a lot bigger player, and you capture a big chunk of that business. So yes, without question, infrastructure would be a big boon.
At its maximum capacity, what is the visitor volume that could be on the Skywalk if it was fully occupied, being fully used by the total number of visitors potentially that could be passed through every day?
Yeah, we felt like we could get 6,000 people a day on the Skywalk. So yeah, I mean, you run those numbers out, it's over 2 million people, probably around slightly over 2 million in a year.
And Mr. Jin has the right to put at least half of that total volume on the Skywalk pursuant to his agreement, correct?
Yes.
So,
so 1 million people or slightly over, yeah.
So he could put 3,000 people a day, his own customers out there, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And he could sell those 3,000 people a day tickets at 15% less than any other ticket, because that's his right to buy, correct?
That's the way the contract was written, yes.
Was it your anticipation and that of Mr. Jin's that when this transaction was first undertaken in 2003, that Mr. Jin's benefit would really continue for many years into the future?
Sure, it's a 25-year contract with another 15 years related to what you just discussed. That's 40 years of benefit. So I anticipated him to, in the end, be a very worthwhile investment.
And would that be true even more so after the tribe has completed the infrastructure improvements, the improvement of the Diamond Bar Road, and have essentially made the investment that they need to make it a easier destination to get to?
Without question. Infrastructure, really different development points at Grand Canyon West. We're going to lead to more people coming, overnight stay. Now they're staying longer. Now they're going to be even more likely to want to do a skywalk because you're there. Even adding additional venues, such as a tram, would attract more people and ultimately benefit the skywalk and all of Grand Canyon West, without question.
You've previously indicated that when you negotiated with Mr. Jin, you did not provide Mr. Jin with any portion of the entrance fee that is paid to the tribe. When people would come out there to see the skywalk, the tribe receives the full entrance fee under Mr. Jin's contract. Did subsequent vendors who came out there negotiate and obtain a portion of the entrance fee that Mr. Jin didn't get?
Not a vendor, but there was another, I guess, investor, you might say, that became a partner, so to speak, like David on a lesser scale, building a western town. And as a part of that agreement, although that agreement does give even a higher percentage of net revenue to the tribe than the skywalk, there is a component of $2 that was given from the entrance related to it. And when you compare them, you're pushing it to say that the western town's $1 million investment versus whatever skywalk lies out at it.
You don't think it's $1 million investment, though, the western town?
It's that's probably the high end.
Okay. So even though that investor made a much smaller investment, he received a $2 portion of the entrance fee, where Mr. Jin, who's got a much higher investment, didn't get any portion of it.
That's correct. Now the $2 didn't go directly to him. They went to the partnership, him and the tribe together. So given the delineation of the net revenue, I mean, you can kind of make a case that even 70–80% of that comes right back to the tribe. But yes, there was a portion, and then later we added a wagon ride, and then an additional piece of the entrance was granted to Jim Brown at that time at the western town. So I think it was like $5. Now the $2 was up to 450,000 people. So once you get past 450, it wasn't any money. But the $3 was going away when I was still there, and I understand that it's still happening. So it's basically about $5 going there, right now.
We're going to wrap up this portion of your testimony because you have a plane you have to catch. And so we're going to let you leave to go to the airport. You are available, though, if the arbiter would like to have you testify via telephone call, correct?
Yes.
And
yeah,
you would
I'd be happy to.
And you would be available should opposing counsel want to cross-examine you via phone call?
Yes.
All right. Let me close this portion of it by asking you to comment to the arbiter on what the tribe has undertaken, specifically in declaring eminent domain over Mr. Jin's management agreement, forcing him off of the Skywalk, actually physically taking over the Skywalk operation itself. Do you have a reaction to that, and would you share that, please, with the arbiter?
Yeah, my reaction is, great disappointment and, kind of shame, honestly, on behalf of what they've done. It isn't consistent with the spirit of what we put together 9 years ago, in 2003. That wasn't a part of the thought processes when we went into it, and it just doesn't feel like good faith from the perspective of what I'm seeing, particularly related to throwing out numbers and just stepping in. And I don't understand the detail of the dispute back and forth on who owes what. I don't know every detail of that, but I find it hard to believe, one, it can't be worked out amiably, and I just can't see a means or need to ever go to this level. One, to be blatantly dishonest on the infrastructure component and really the final building of the building, and to take this approach of just stepping in and taking it and trying to get it for 10 cents on the dollar. Nor do I think that it's the best interest or move on the tribe's part. In my opinion, they will, even if they were to be successful in getting the share, the whole is going to decrease so much that they're going to actually come away with less by doing it. So,
why do you say the whole will be less?
Well, from the time that I was there, and I believe it's still the current, he brings almost a third of the people. If he's doesn't have that level of interest, and I know of the fact that he could really make more money, particularly with the reality of Diamond Bar Road, to go to the South Rim with his people. And I believe I see, times when I've come to Vegas, I see buses heading clearly to the South Rim that are his. So he's doing that now to a degree. And in other words, a lot of business is going to be lost to Grand Canyon West if this ends and they just take over and he's just no longer a part of the equation at all out there. And this concept of it just, somebody else is going to step in and take his business. I have a pretty good understanding of his business from the time when I worked there and asking lots of questions. And I think the barrier of entry into his business is extremely large, and that it's just not going to happen. And so that's a lost component that's already probably at least a quarter, maybe a third of the business. But what about the future? I mean, how big a player is the Asian market, in particular the Chinese market, to the U.S. as we begin to open our doors more and more? So it becomes a bigger player than it is today that you potentially miss out on. And because of that, and alongside of, I think, honestly, a stronger business acumen and ability to manage that he brings would make the pot so much bigger. And given that you're already got 80% of the pot, but if the pot goes in half, 100% is not as much anymore, right? As the 80% was when it was double. So, that's my opinion. And so, I hate to see it for the sake of the tribe. I have a lot of friends there. I want to see the tribe succeed, and I don't think this is the best move for them for their future. So, yeah, it's relating to what's going on. A lot of disappointment, sick about it, to be honest, because I put so much into it myself. This project I carried as my baby. I, devoted a big percentage of my career to this point to see this for the future benefit of the tribe, and entered into what I thought was a fair transaction, and want to see justice in both sides benefiting properly according to what we agreed upon. So,
Anything that you would like to add before you leave, because I know you have to go catch a plane? Anything further that you'd like to share with the Arbiter before we dismiss you?
no, I just say I'm definitely available. I obviously was intricately involved with all of these processes and have a very thorough memory of what happened, and definitely want to make myself available to see an amiable solution for both sides. So,
Thank you for your time today, sir. Operator.
This is the end of tape number 2 and concludes the videotaped arbitration testimony of Steven Beattie taken on March 19th, 2012. The time is 12:17 p.m. We're off the record.